While digging around deep in a storage shed at the restaurant, I found this ancient piece of technology. A Cook Shack electric smoker from the 90s. The screen is almost impossible to read, and the single knob barely works, but it keeps the smoker at 225 degrees Fahrenheit. But this thing is still a beast of a smoker. It hasn't been used in quite a while, so I need to get this baby cleaned up. While I'm doing that, I want to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. I have been dealing with depression and ADHD since I was a teenager. When I first noticed it, I had no idea what was going on. Spiraling thoughts led to panic, which inevitably led me to long episodes of depression. Feeling those long bouts of depression made me just want to hide. But since I was a teenager and in school, I had to try to be social. So instead of hiding physically, I hid behind a facade of being okay. Eventually, I sought the help of a therapist. And from that very first time, I found that simply talking to someone about your problems can relieve so much of what you're feeling internally. And while therapy has been incredibly helpful for me, I know that finding the right therapist and making time for appointments can be challenging. That's where BetterHelp, the sponsor of today's video, comes in. They've made it easier than ever to connect with a qualified therapist who can provide you the support you need. First, you go to their site, you answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. You can do it all from your phone or computer, via phone call, video chat, or messaging, however you feel most comfortable. It's the easiest possible way to start talking to a therapist. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/CarnivorousChef or choose CarnivorousChef during sign up to enjoy a special discount on your first month. The link will be in the description below, and thank you BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. One of the first smoked foods I can remember eating would be ribs. I don't remember who made them, but I will credit my brother with making them since I know he really enjoyed cooking them. I will be following a similar process on how he would have done this, but with some simple seasoning. Speaking of simple seasoning, simply combine 4 parts salt to 1 part black pepper. You can skip the pepper if you want to keep it even more simple, but it does add a nice flavor to the end product. I like to prep my ribs on a baking sheet just for the sake of keeping things clean. Feel free to prep yours on the bathroom floor if that's more your speed. Today, I'll be using some St. Louis style spare ribs. It's just what I had readily available. You can always take spare ribs and trim them into St. Louis style yourself. No matter what you decide on, just know that you'll likely get at least 2 racks per pack. So, be ready to feed at least a couple of people or to have some leftovers. Trim them up if there are any unnecessary flaps hanging around. You don't have to go too crazy because almost all of this fat will render. You can also remove the silver skin on the backside of the ribs as well, but if you're feeling lazy like I was on this day, just score it and let it separate while it cooks. Once all of these small things are done, season both sides of these racks with your salt and pepper blend. It should look like your kitchen counter on a Friday night after hitting the club. That's right, press in those powdery flakes. Today we'll be smoking these ribs over applewood smoke, low and slow. 225 degrees Fahrenheit to be exact. This whole process should take about 3 hours in total with new steps at each hour. The first hour we will simply blast these meaty guys with smoke. When you open the smoker for the first time, you may notice that the ribs are looking a little dry. I'm going to use some white distilled vinegar to sprinkle on top of mine every 15 minutes. Also known as the rib spritzer hour. Feel free to use whatever liquid you want if you're not looking for that kind of flavor. Some ham base mixed with water would be nice here as well. After the spritzer hour, it's time to finish them off. They've gotten enough smoke and they need to get tender now. Simply place them in some parchment paper with your choice of liquid, preferably whatever you use during the spritzing hour, and wrap them tightly. Doing this will help to braise the ribs and to pull the meat back from the bone. After this final hour, they are ready. If you want to be meticulous about your rib tenderness, aim for about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Now we can cut into these and reap the rewards of our zen-like patience. Time got away from me during the spritzing hour, so I only spritzed my ribs 2 times, and the tops dried out a touch. But you won't make my same mistake, will you? It's not too big of a deal because we have a decent smoke ring and a juicy rib. These aren't completely fall off the bone either, which is quite nice. I'm not a big fan of when I have to essentially drink my ribs and figure out where all the cartilage is. But these were simple and delicious. Just using salt and pepper really lets the ribs shine, a nice smoky flavor surrounding a juicy cut of meat. I want to start this recipe by saying that if you're on a strict diet, there's nothing wrong with following these steps with some nice beef bone broth and salt only. You don't have to have all these extra ingredients for a tasty outcome. Just letting all my carnivore folks know that I'm still thinking about you and I do love you. For this smoked barbacoa, we will be going through a fair amount of ingredients. And I'll start off with about 5 cloves of garlic. Simply smash them and get them finely chopped. Place this into a bowl and then we can move on to our chipotles and adobo sauce. To be honest, I enjoy the adobo sauce more than the chipotles themselves, but the peppers add a nice smoky flavor and a little heat. Feel free to strain the sauce from the peppers and use that only if you want to skip the bulk of the heat. For my recipe, I decided to go with 3 of the peppers with most of the sauce from the can. Give them the same smash and chop treatment like you did the garlic, and toss that into your bowl. Next up, we need a little lime. We want to extract... We want to extract as much juice and information as possible from this little guy, so we need to put some pressure on him. Where's the Joker hiding? Cut it in half and then squeeze it into the bowl. Go ahead and throw the whole lime carcass in as well. Now, these roasted green chilies are an optional ingredient in my opinion. However, they were sitting right next to the Chipotles, and I couldn't resist grabbing them as well. Throw an entire 4-ounce jar into the slop bowl of delicious flavors. Now we need to spice it up with some cumin. About a half teaspoon should be enough. Some oregano leaves in the amount of a quarter teaspoon. Some spice it onion powder in the amount of a half teaspoon. And finally some salt. Since I had this S&P blend left over from earlier, I use that, about a half teaspoon. The final step to finish off this zesty bowl is 2 cups of beef stock. I'm using watered down beef base here, which is just salty already. Give your mixture a taste for salt and adjust accordingly after adding your stock. I made a mistake by thinking that 5 bay leaves would be okay, but learn from me and go with about 2 instead. Give this a stir and set it aside. Now we can finally present the star of the show, 3.3 pounds of chuck roast. Give it the inaugural slap and then we can start to break it down into smaller pieces. All we really need to do is cut this into manageable portions. After your beef is cut up, place a pan over medium-high heat. Since I'm using an aluminum pan, I'm going to add just a touch of olive oil to keep things from sticking. Now put the meat in the pan in small batches to keep it from steaming. All we're trying to do here is get some nice fond. Once you get some color on all sides like this, move it to some sort of heat-resistant dish. Repeat this until all of your meat is nicely brown and there's a substantial buildup of fond. Oh yeah, that's that good shit. Remember that sauce we made earlier? If you don't, please go get checked out by a physician. I'm worried about you. Pour the sauce into the pan and begin to scrape the bottom to release the fond. We also want this to come to a light simmer before pouring it on top of the beef. Now it's time to take this out to the old smoky boy. I'm going to be smoking this over hickory low and slow, or about 225 degrees for 2 hours. To ensure all of it is smoked well, I will be turning the meat inside the pan every 30 minutes. After 2 hours, it smells amazing and the sauce is light in color a bit. Now cover this with a piece of parchment paper and some foil, and then place it into an oven or back into your smoker at 300 degrees Fahrenheit for about 45 more minutes or until it's fall apart tender. And after patiently waiting, this is what we're left with. Some of my larger chunks weren't quite falling completely apart, and I was running out of time at the restaurant, so I shredded what I could and chopped the rest. And let me tell you, this shit is good enough to make some tacos with. Simply add about 2 ounces of sharp cheddar to a non-stick surface that's set to medium heat. You may have to coax it into a perfect circle. Place a small handful of your meat on half the cheese, and then fold it over. Let it cook with the meat inside for maybe 2 minutes in total, ensuring to flip it once. Now, I'm usually hypercritical about the food I cook, but this is one of those rare occasions where I know I hit the nail directly in its stupid head. These are rich, juicy, and packed with flavor from the smoke, garlic, spices, and chilies. I don't think anyone would be upset about these tacos ever. Hey, before we continue, I just want to let you know that we have some merch available down below. Pull it, rub it, smoke it. It's available in a t-shirt, hat, apron. Pick whichever one you want. It's only going to be available for 30 days, so get it while you can. All right, let's continue. The biggest problem with smoked chicken is that it's usually dry. I'm going to try to mitigate that as much as possible with a brine. Get a bucket or container with 1 gallon of the freshest tap water you can find and add in 1 cup of salt. A lot of people say to heat the water while mixing the salt, but with just 2 to 3 minutes of whisking, you could see we have made a clear salt solution without heat. Now, it's time for the chicken to make its appearance. Remove it from its little body bag and let's trim it up a touch. There was a lot of excess neck here, so I cut that off. There was also an excess of butt flap, so I cut that off as well. Let's see if there's any goodies inside. Here we can see the chicken penis. And this is the heart. The gizzards, I think. And finally, a big floppy liver. You can smoke all of these extras as well if you want, but I don't want, so I'll be giving these to the raccoons outside. Place the chicken into your bucket of brine. If it tries to float to the top, place a plate or a bowl on top of it to keep it submerged. Let this go for 4 hours or at least overnight for better results. Now that it's the next day, we could prep this bird for the smoker. I will be spatchcocking this chicken for a more even cook. This simply involves removing the spine so that it can lay flat. All you have to do is cut through the rib bones until you reach where the thigh attaches to the spine. Once you're there, find the joint and cut through it. After you have one side done, simply repeat the same steps on the other. You can use this portion to make some stock, so feel free to save this in the freezer or give it to those adorable little guys digging through your trash right now. We can flip our chicken over and press in the middle of the breastbone to flatten it out. Here I still have a good bit of that salt and pepper blend, but I want to add some extra flavors to it. I'll leave the full written recipe in the description below. A little garlic powder, a bit of onion powder, and finishing it up with a little smoked paprika. Jostle this around and mix it, and then season both sides. It doesn't need a ton of seasoning since it was brine, but most of this is just to ensure the skin is also delicious. Okay, we could take this out to the smoker where I'll be using a 50-50 mix of mesquite and hickory to smoke this chicken. I'll be doing this at 225 degrees Fahrenheit for about 1.5 hours to get some good smoke. Since I can't adjust the temperature, I'm going to have to bring it inside and toss it into the oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm shooting for an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit on the breast and 170 degrees Fahrenheit on the thigh. While that's cooking away, let's make a quick sour cream based white barbecue sauce. 1 cup sour cream, 1 tablespoon of horseradish, 1/4 teaspoon of fresh cracked black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder, 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of hot sauce, 1 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, 2 tablespoons of distilled white vinegar, and finally a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. If you didn't catch all that, it will be written in the description below. Give this a whisk until homogeneous and give it a taste for anything missing. I went ahead and added another tablespoon of vinegar because I like that tang. Okay, the chicken should be ready. The oven was quite brittle on the skin, but that's okay. If you smoked yours to completion, you shouldn't have this problem. But it's not really a problem because it still looks and smells fucking delicious. Dump those juices over the top and split this baby in half. Slap that half bird on a plate and top it with some of your sauce for a presentation. Yeah, that wasn't the best idea. Just put the sauce on the side. Presentation be damned, this is awesome. The brine did its job and kept her from drying out. The smoke flavor is fantastic, and that tang that the sauce provides is a nice complement to the dish. You didn't think I was going to leave out the mother of all smoked meats, did you? Of course not. Brisket is my favorite cut from any barbecue joint that offers it. The issue is that in Alabama, there are not many places that offer good brisket, which is why I'm thinking about opening a barbecue restaurant. If you're interested in that at all, leave a comment below. Brisket tends to have a lot of hard fat on it, so we need to trim it up a bit if yours is looking like mine. We need to rub those chunks down with a rub of sorts. I'm going to go with 3/4 cup of salt, some more of that spice it onion powder, about 2 tablespoons worth, granulated garlic in the amount of 2 tablespoons, and about 1 tablespoon of black pepper. Give this a mix and sprinkle liberally all over this beast. This thing weighs about 12 pounds after trimming, so you're not going to overseason it. I promise. For the best results, let this sit for about 12 hours in the fridge to let some of that seasoning penetrate. After that time, it will have darkened a bit and stiffened up just a touch. Let's bring this out to our smoker, which is set to 225 degrees Fahrenheit, as usual. I'm going to be smoking this over a mix of hickory and applewood today. Let this smoke for about 6 hours or until an internal temperature of 165 Fahrenheit has been reached. Also added extra wood at the 3-hour mark to ensure it got enough smoke penetration. If you notice it drying out at all, you can spray it down with some beef broth, but since we let it sit in the seasoning overnight, we did not have that issue. It needs to finish cooking, and since we can't raise the temperature in the smoker, guess what we're going to do? That's right. Bring it inside and wrap it in parchment paper and foil to let it finish in the oven. The key to wrapping this is to make sure all of your parchment paper / foil is folded up to prevent any of these juices from leaking out. The juice this produced will allow it to braise. Once you've got your beef package fully sealed up, place it onto a pan and into your oven or smoker at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. This will take about another 6 to 7 hours, but we're just looking for an internal temperature of at least 205 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it's there, let it rest in its wrapper for another hour. And after that painful hour, we can finally slice into our brisket. There are going to be 2 parts to this brisket, the flat and the point. You can remove the point separately if you like, but I like to keep the point on top just for larger cuts of brisket. No matter what you do, make sure you're cutting against the grain. You'll know you're doing this if you pull out a piece like this and it looks like a little accordion. And oh my, this is decadent. Don't squeeze your brisket like I did. You want to retain those juices. I just needed some visual representation to show how sexy this thing is. And that's it. Slice it up and enjoy it just like this.